In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Commander Appo, or Appo, however you prefer to pronounce him, from the Saga collection. So he was actually one of the very last action figures released in the Saga collection. He was figure number 68 at the time. And going back and checking out his official release date, it turns out he was actually released in 2007. He's one of those last waves that was just right before the 30th anniversary line. I actually never saw this guy in stores at the time. I'm not saying that he wasn't in stores, but every time I went hunting for action figures at the time, I just don't recall seeing him. And I know he's probably one of those characters, if I did see him in the wild at the time, I probably would have gotten him. And I think a lot of those last action figures in the Saga collection were very hard to find anyway, because a lot of the initial ones released in 2006, especially a lot of those Empire Strikes Back figures, they were peg warming heavily at the time. I recall seeing, I think General Riken it was, and a lot of the characters like that at the time were just warming the pegs nonstop, all the way into the 30th anniversary even. So that probably eliminated a lot of the shelf space to get characters like Commander Appo out here. So if you don't know anything about him, technically he's in Revenge of the Sith, and even though this action figure is sourced from Revenge of the Sith, technically based upon the design Hasbro made here, he's actually an expanding universe character, and it's from the comic book Jedi Purge, I think it is. And the reason why you can distinguish that is because he has the pauldron here. So I don't think in Revenge of the Sith he was initially slated as being in it. I'm pretty sure now they consider the character that confronts Bail Organa at the Jedi Temple when he says, "There's been a rebellion, sir. Don't worry, we have the situation under control. I'm sorry, sir. It's time for you to leave." I'm pretty sure that's Commander Appo, or one of those other 501st troopers around. And of course, none of them had a pauldron at the time, so, I never really heard Commander Appo really being labeled as one of those clones until much later in years. It could have been at the time, but I just don't recall. It seems like it's something that's developed more in recent years, I suppose. So Hasbro basically did just a repaint of the 501st Trooper. There is some weathering applied, and then they gave him a pauldron, and that's pretty much it. So even though he's pretty much just a simple repaint and a retool, it feels like an all-new action figure, and I'm really glad that they were able to get this one out. We haven't had Commander Appo released again until recently in the Black Series line, and of course that one doesn't have a pauldron, and it's a very light shade of blue, so they don't really compare side by side. So at least we got this one. We'll just take a closer look at him. So I'm trying to think here. Yeah, it's not quite the antenna mold, or actually it is the antenna mold. The pauldron here looks like it's kind of hiding the slit in the back. So yeah, this is just the plain antenna mold 501st clone. But he does have a little bit of unique detailing in him, and that's mostly in the weathering. As you can see, he does have some dirt and grime on his armor here, on his biceps there, and around the comm link, and behind his arm here, and of course on his legs. So at least Hasbro didn't do just a straight repack. They actually did put a little care into this to make him unique. So the antenna mold does remain one of my favorite Clone Trooper sculpts to this date. It still might be my personal favorite overall. I just think the proportions look right on it. The articulation's good enough to where you can get these clones in most of the poses that you're going to want them in anyway. And it's just a solid sculpt overall. Nothing looks off about it. It looks exactly like what you see in the movies. And to some extent, I wish Hasbro was still utilizing this sculpt today. So he does have the stripes down his legs here, both sides. does have the blue shoulder armor here. And of course, the blue on his helmet. He has a little bit of blue detailing on his, I would assume it's supposed to be like his bandolier or his attachment to his belt from his pauldron. So in terms of articulation, if you have a bunch of these antenna mold clones, you know exactly what you're getting into. He does have the ball joint at the head, and shoulders, and elbows, swivel wrist. He does have a joint at the torso, which feels really good, actually. Very fluid joint there. He does have the swivel hips, and then the hinged knees and hinged ankles. So super articulation all around. His head is kind of it could pop off really easily because of that pauldron. It's not really a natural fit, and the sculpt wasn't really made to accommodate a pauldron per se. I mean, it stays into place, but if you mess with this head enough, you could probably get the pop off. And as you can see that ball point pretty easily. Yeah. So if you work with it, you could get that pauldron off if you really want him to be just a standard 501st clone, or if you want him more accurate to the film, where he doesn't have the pauldron. Otherwise, this is more specific to his EU appearance. Jedi Purge, I've never read that comic book before. I would assume it takes place during Order 66, kind of around the events of Revenge of the Sith, of what we don't see on screen. He does have a little bit of blue around his wrists there as well. I know a lot of the 501st clones these days from Hasbro, they're not really doing that. I think that's more of a Clone Wars specific thing. In terms of weapons and accessories, very basic. He just has the standard DC-15 rifle here. Same thing we've seen lots of times before. He does hold it pretty good. And he does have that comlink sculpted there. Then, of course, the Saga collection figures all came with their basic stand. It has the Revenge of the Sith logo on it here. It says Commander Poe. Which mine, I know it's kind of hard to tell, but it doesn't look like the lettering is 100% straight on this. So the printing's slightly off. It almost looks like it goes up in an angle a little bit. And he does fit pretty good on this stand. Or maybe not so much these days. But he'll stay in the place. I think the peg on these ones is just slightly bigger compared to what we would get on the stand. So now a lot of these figures are kind of loose on these stands for me. But they'll stay in the place, and even if they got knocked over a little bit, I think they would still stay. And he did come with a hologram, of course, and I'm pretty sure this is the hologram it came with. And it's the Stormtrooper in the kneeling position. Unfortunately, at the time, Hasbro did not do any clones or droids, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't, considering we just came off of Revenge of the Sith. But they did do a Rebel Fleet Trooper and the Stormtrooper here, which looks pretty good. There are blue ones as well, I think. I only have red ones, though. And I have two of these guys. It's a pretty good pose. Wish we can get our action figures in a pose like that. See the E11 there. And they even did the holster. So it looks pretty good. What else? Guess I'll do some side-by-side comparisons. I did bring out some of his company with him. At some point I would like to do a Jedi Temple March diorama with all the 501st clones I have. And of course Lord Vader himself. And that is an excellent looking scene there. It's always nice seeing Commander Poe flanked by the 501st. Up until Captain Rex, I think Commander Poe was considered like the default clone commander that served under Anakin into Vader. Of course, there was Commander Vil as well, and then Commander Bo, I think it was. I don't have either of those two yet. I do want to get them at some point. I have tried bidding for them on eBay at one point, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. So perhaps soon. And I would love to get all three of the 501st Clone Commanders side by side. But anyways, that's pretty much all I can tell you about Commander Poe here. So would I recommend him for your collection? I totally would. I actually only paid like $5 plus $5 shipping for this back in 2017, I think it was. So it was either 17 or 18. So he's one of those action figures, even brand new. He can either be as expensive as you want him to be, or he can be as inexpensive, I suppose. Of course, I paid $10 altogether for him. I won him in a bid on eBay, and I was actually the only bidder. But if you do look at some of the buy it now prices, oftentimes they're like in the $30 or $40 range, which is outrageous for this. I would not recommend spending that price for this. It's just an antenna mold 501st with a pauldron. So try and look for a deal for him. And I think the best way to go about it in this particular case for Commander Poe is to try and win him in an auction. I think he's one of those characters that while he's in high demand, he's not exactly in the most demand where people are actively hunting for him in auctions on eBay. And I think some people might psych themselves out when they see those buy it now prices. Some of them are pretty outrageous. They're like, oh, I'm not going to bother with him then. And then they kind of miss out on some of the auctions. So that's the route I would recommend, is look for auctions for him on eBay if you're wanting him. Again, I've never seen this guy in the wild ever, as far as I can recall. Even in comic book shops, so I would say your chances of finding him there are probably slim. Unless you got a really well-stocked comic book shop around, maybe you'll be lucky enough to find him for a decent price, that is. So, something to keep an eye out for, and he's highly recommended. Oh, and if I said earlier he was figure number 68, turns out he's actually figure number 64, actually. But close enough. Towards the end of the line. But anyways, that concludes this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for plenty more in the future. There will always be more to come. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I always appreciate all your support. And check out some links in the description if you haven't done so already. And as always, thanks for watching.